Good morning and welcome to Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. We have a great guest this morning who's a personality and also give us a little perspective on the reading of our community. But as always, we try to start Viewpoint with a kudo or two. And this morning, I think I'm going to make it or two. Just by good coincidence, our first kudo will be to a young lady who has published her first book. An 11-year-old E.G. Keith from West Lincoln Broadwell School has published a book called Havoc, young adult fantasy fiction with romance and amnesia. Well, the romance failed me by. I'm not going to relate to that, but the amnesia I can relate to. So, congratulations. And appropriately enough, we have our librarian with us this morning, who Judy's going to introduce. But we had another kudo that I wanted to bring up, if I can do this without crackling the newspaper. A young lady over Mount Pulaski Elkhart School here. Cassidy Clark is Senior of the Month. Comely glass that she is. She has a nice picture here in the Courier this morning. And so congratulations to our Senior of the Month over there in the Hilltopper. So let's get serious. We've got a fellow who drove all the way from Lincoln.
All the way from Lincoln. He did that.
So let's introduce our guest this morning, Judith. Okay?
Yes, well, we're kind of having Book Wednesday, I guess. We would like to welcome Mike Starasta, and he is the new librarian. Mr. Summerall, bless his heart, has retired.
Oh, he's been there a while now. He's an old-timer now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Mike is at the library uptown, and the first question I asked him off air was, how do you like being in that building? I think it's such a beautiful building, and you appreciate that too, don't you, Mike?
Very much so, and I'd just like to begin by saying thank you for having me on your program, and I'd just like to wish everyone out there a good day and good morning.
Well, bless your
heart.
Good
morning, sir.
And yes, the Carnegie Building, there are two buildings. We have the Carnegie Building and the Annex. The Carnegie Building was built in 1902.
I didn't realize it was that old. My gracious. It's older than I am.
And as I said earlier to you two, I think those older buildings like that really have character to them that you just don't see in modern architecture.
Amen.
It is truly. Within a block of one another, we have two architectural gems downtown. Our courthouse, which is an architectural gem, the Carnegie Library, which is just really something to see inside and out. The inside is probably more appealing than the outside of that Carnegie Building. They got some nice features in there.
What do you think the lumber in that building would cost in today's terms?
I don't have any idea.
It would break the bank.
Quite a bit, I would think.
Yes.
I've said this on this very microphone before, showing my ignorance. For the longest time, I thought all Carnegie libraries looked exactly like ours. But that's not so. He just gave money to communities, and they put their own versions up. But we were very lucky. The folks that planned our library did a magnificent job, and the way it's laid out inside. And now let's talk about the Annex across the alley. Just a minute, Mr. Starasta.
Yes, well, the Annex was originally the Woolworth store, and it was taken on by the library, I think, around 1994. And that is where we have our children's area as well as our fiction collection and also videos, DVDs, etc., that people can check out.
Well, and I bet you have a lot of those because people are really into that. And when they built the Carnegie Building, they didn't make room for those, of course, because they wouldn't have dreamt there'd be something like that.
No, in 1902, I would guess they had no idea
what they'd be dealing with.
Years.
Mike, with reference to the children's books, I've been over there in your Annex on occasions, and your staff, really, you've got a great staff.
Yes, we do.
Your staff makes it an appointment point to get particular entertainers or somebody who's a specialist in something to entertain their kids. And I have been there looking for a book one, and I was listening while I was watching, paying more attention to your entertainer than I was to what I was doing. And I got entranced in how he had those youngsters, good old rugrats, captivated, and they just hung on every word. And in the process of talking to these kids, he was working in the things about being nice to people, being polite, and terms you should use. And so I thought, boy, that's a capital idea.
Well, we have a lot of programs such as that, particularly during our summer reading program.
That's when it was.
Yeah. And we'll have more coming this summer. So I urge people just to pay attention to our website and contact the library for information about summer reading.
Yes. Let's talk about, the summer's going to be here before we know it. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you have that are special for summertime.
Well, mainly we have a summer reading program, again, where we have presenters who will come and present to the children. We have craft activities for children, things that children can do to win prizes, say by reading a certain number of books, etc.
That's nice.
And we have activities going on actually year-round. We have, for instance, children's story times that are every Wednesday at 10 o'clock and 3:30 in the library. Today, for example, the book is going to be The Surprise Garden by Zoe Hall, and it's going to be read by one of our employees, Lydia. And there will also be a craft at the library that kids can pick up in relation to the book.
Oh, what a nice idea.
And then next Wednesday, it's going to be Are You My Mother, is the name of the book, by B.P. Eastman, also read by Lydia, at 10 and 3:30. And the craft will be a birdhouse kit that kids can pick up.
Now, is there a little fee for the birdhouse kit, for instance?
No, the crafts are free. And we also have some other activities going on right now. For example, this is Women's History Month, and we have a display in the Carnegie Building concerning this. We have a number of books on display, but we also have a collection of needlecraft arts that local women have made that we have on display in the Carnegie. For instance, it has Hardanger needlework by Emma Elliott, who is the mother of one of our employees, and I had never heard of Hardanger before.
The Scandinavians did that. I have several pieces.
Yeah, I looked it up, and it's a Scandinavian form of needlework that's named after a region in Norway. And we also have needle tatting by Martha Cornell, quilting by Joan Horam, hope I pronounced all that correctly, needle felting by Margaret Zwilling, quilted bags by Joe Shoemaker, basket weaving by Deborah Getchell Parker, and a mohair bear by Rochelle Morgan Joseph.
All kinds of different things.
You know, I mentioned earlier, Mike, that you have a great staff, and that you do. An issue that people might not know about is they'll get books for you. If you don't have it in stock in the Lincoln Library, and by the way, the book I had ordered must have been a very popular book. I was 14th on the list. People wanted to know about Anthony Fauci, and the book was entitled The Real Fauci by Robert Kennedy Jr. And they got it for me. I had to wait a little while, but they're very polite and very prompt. They'll do anything they can to get you the book that you're looking for.
They're eager to be helpful, aren't they?
Yeah, it's very helpful.
Yes, through interlibrary loan, we can loan books in from libraries throughout the state of Illinois and even from outside the state of Illinois. So, in other words, even though we may not have an item, there are many, many other places that we can get it from.
Now, do you have physical parameters that you serve? Do you have to be within a certain area to utilize the library?
If you're not in the library district, you can still use the library by paying the equivalent fee, which is $79. But for that fee, you have access again to audiobooks that you can download. You have access to print books that we can get from throughout the state of Illinois, to music CDs, to DVD movies, to the programs that we put on.
And would that be an annual thing then?
Yes, and I would think that for $79, that's actually a very good deal.
Well, I'll tell you,
that's
if
cheap.
you were going to go to the store and purchase a couple books, you'd go through $79 pretty fast.
Which brings me to the economic sense. Books are expensive today. Gosh, they're expensive.
Yes, they are.
Whence cometh your money to get these books? And who selects the books that you will buy for the library, Mr. Starasta?
Well, the money comes from taxes of those who live in the library district. That's why the $79 is basically the equivalent of what you would pay if you lived in district.
Right.
As far as selection, well, there are a number of us that do that. I am involved in the selection, so are the head of each, you could say, department. Caroline is the head of in charge of the Carnegie area, and she selects a lot of the nonfiction books over there. And then you have individuals such as April in the annex who would do some fiction selection, and Donna, who is the youth services or children's librarian, selects those as well. We also have some of the popular authors who are on sort of an automatic order. So, example, James Patterson is a very popular author, and so we just have those on automatic order from a company that sends them to us when they come out, so we don't have to physically place an order for them.
Oh, good. Yeah, I know you've held a couple of those for me, and I've enjoyed them immensely. I use the library quite a bit, but I dare say I haven't been as timely about your exhibits. I didn't realize you had a Hardanger exhibit up there. I'd like to see that. I think I'll go up there and see it.
Our topic this morning is our Lincoln Library, the gem of our community. Speaking of gems and services, we don't put this program on without sponsors, so we're going to pay a few minutes to them, and go ahead, Mr. Ash. Right, back live here in the studios of WLCN, high on County Road 2250. Our guest this morning, Mr. Mike Starasta, director of a gym that we have down there right across the street from Latham Park, our Lincoln Library. Number one, physically, it's a real asset for us to have in the community. And culturally, it's further an asset. You know, Mike, when I was a kid on bicycles, I ride around town all the time like all the rest of the kids do. But my mother never worried where I was, so she knew I was probably at the library.
Okay, that's a good place to be, safe place.
And that kind of sparked over into my future life. 648-5510. Some of you folks might have had an extra experience at the library or have a question about it, so don't hesitate to call in, 648-5510. Judith K., I'm passing the microphone to you because you had something that you wanted to discuss.
Yeah. We think about the library and books, of course.
Yes.
But there's so much more there that you can take advantage of. And we were just talking before the break about the displays you have currently of handwork that people have done. And back in the day, as they say, the ladies used to do some absolutely beautiful handwork.
Yes,
Go ahead, Mike.
and as I mentioned earlier, we have what we call fiber arts work on display by local ladies. We have Hardanger needlework on display. We have needle tatting, quilting, needle felting, and quilted bags. We have basket weaving and a mohair bear. on display that were all made by local ladies around here. And these displays will be up until early April, when we are going to be putting up a display for National Poetry Month.
National Poetry Month.
Yes.
Oh, very, very good. Further on the needlework business, Mike, Jim gets this community announcements that he uses on the air. And Mondays in Atlanta, right up here in the big city of Atlanta, the people are doing handwork, and you are welcome to attend on Mondays from 1 to 3, and the Quilt Corner quilting session is on Thursdays at 1 to 3, and they're working on quilts for local charity projects, as well as military-themed quilts that will be raffled to raise money for sewing supplies. It's nice to hear that those kind of homey things that people used to do are still going on in some corners of our county here, and thank the people for that.
And you know, we speak of our library being kind of an architectural gem, and it is. We have right here in Jim's hometown a little library that's a beautiful little thing.
Yes, it is.
And well organized, well staffed, and it's great for a small community. For instance, the young lady over there at Emden that took over the old railroad station, they call it the Whistle Stop, as I remember, and they created a library over there. Things such as this are just architectural gems in their own right. Can you imagine taking over an old railroad depot and creating, and they worked hard. There was a lot of physical work went into that. Those ladies worked hard. So hats off to them, too, to their libraries that, down in Elkhart, there's a lovely little library. So, and over there in Elkhart, we didn't have one in Burtonview.
We've got a phone call, Bill.
Oh, we have a phone call. All right. Hang on a minute. I'll get our headsets adjusted here. I hope I can go right ahead, please, caller.
Good morning, and thank you, sir, for your good directorship of our library.
Well,
and I just wondered if you could explain the different electronic reading services that the library offers.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. A.
Yes, electronically we provide access to e-books or electronic books that individuals can basically check out. You have to download an app called Libby to your phone, and then you can use your library card to actually check out the book. It's good for a certain period of time, and then it just disappears off your phone, so to speak.
Oh, I tell you, that's a miracle.
So you can...
Honest to Pete.
Another service.
How wonderful for people, especially who are homebound.
Absolutely. You can download it to your phone and then read it anywhere.
Oh, that is just wonderful.
And it provides access to thousands of popular titles. So it's a very good service.
Would children's books be included in that?
Some are.
Uh-huh.
A lot of it does tend to be more, you could say, for older people, adults.
Uh-huh.
We thank our caller for that very pertinent question. That was very nice.
Yes, thank you.
Anybody else now? 648-5510. We have a service there on McLean Street that is just really something unusual. Pekin Street and McLean Street. Forgot Pekin Street. Find your time to go to your library, and if you have any questions, you're going to find a helpful staff that will guide you through. So a lot of people might not have even been in there and take a look. Turn your head up, look towards God in the sky, and see how pretty that library is. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Judy.
It's important to introduce your children to books when they're little, because that's something that they can enjoy and benefit from.
Yes, and one way we do that, again, is through our weekly story times, which are every Wednesday at 10
expand
and
on
then at 3:30.
Mike. Expand on a weekly story time. Tell us how the modus operandi on that.
Okay. Well, we have one of our employees, Lydia, who's actually one of our newest employees, will read books to children. We have expanded back a little bit. We have the Annex building and then the old Heartland building that was used to be owned by Heartland Community College, and where Belltone is as well. We actually own that building. The library does.
I didn't realize
Yeah,
that.
we lease it out to Belltone, but there's also a spare room there that we have now opened up where we have story time. The children come in, have a story read to them, and then there's typically a craft of some type that goes with it.
That is so neat. And repeat again the days and hours for that.
It's every Wednesday at 10 a.m. and then at 3:30 p.m.
And the ages that you encourage to come?
Well, basically any age is welcome.
You know, it occurs to me as I sit here, it takes a kind of a special skill to be able to read to children and hold their attention, which is the important part, and hold their attention. And I think somebody that can do that well is gifted.
Absolutely.
Well, the kids actually benefit as much from learning to sit down and pay attention to something as they do from the actual book that's being shared with them.
Oh, I would absolutely agree. Yes.
There are times in our lives when we do have to sit down and be still, even me.
Mr. Starasta, do you you mentioned somebody who selects certain books. Do you have different people select different categories of literature if you're going to buy books for your shelves? Is that how that works?
Yes, well, again, in the Carnegie Building, Caroline, as her name, does a lot of the selections for nonfiction books. I do some as well. We also have a number of books by popular authors that are on automatic order.
Oh, really?
So they're just
Now, how
sent
does
to
that
us.
work, please?
Well, for instance, popular authors such as James Patterson,
Right.
when a new book comes out, which seems like it's about every week, we
Yes.
get the title automatically shipped to us by a publishing company.
Well, that's a
bookseller.
nice service for you.
Yeah, and then over in the Annex, they take care of also the fiction and the children's book orders as well, because they would know their departments very well.
What would you do without that annex?
It is definitely a blessing, and the staff we have in the Annex, and well, in both buildings, is absolutely wonderful.
That's lucky for you, since you were the new kid on the block for a bit there, aren't you?
I've been there for about 2 years, and yeah, it's taken some... it's wonderful, again, that I have the people I have.
You know, I often thought, Mr. Starasta, that people who learn to read at a reasonably early age and are gifted by God in their interest in continuing to learn to read and follow through into their adult life, they're lucky kids.
Absolutely, and I've been, not surprisingly, I guess I've been a reader my entire life. I think it all started out, well, with me, actually with comic books as a kid.
Sure.
And
Well, but it's reading.
yeah, and we
Okay.
have what we now call graphic novels, which are basically, it's a fancy way of saying comic books, that can be checked out as well. With me, I think a lot of it is that I'm an only child, and so when we would go on a long road trip, sometimes my parents would buy me a new comic book before we'd leave, so I'd have something to look at in the car, and that...
Well, and it
into
wasn't
reading.
anything, you weren't flying airplanes at your dad's head when he was trying to drive. So that helped, too.
Well, old-timers who used to go to Chicago might remember that in Chicago on Wabash there, Crocs and Brentano's
Yes.
was the bookshop of the entire central United States, really. And it was a remarkable place. And you'd go in there looking for a book, and some little old crone back in the back was fussing over books, and you'd go up and ask her, "Oh, I know exactly where that is," and she'd walk right over and pick up the book. It was an amazing place, and I always enjoyed it. I never went to Chicago without coming home with books. And it was people who enjoy reading and are lucky enough to have eyes to do it are indeed lucky people, particularly at our older ages.
Well, I bet you have staff that knows the books like the back of their hand.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely they do. And of course, we also use our computer system
Sure.
to help locate books if we don't know exactly where they are.
Say, another service that the library offers, I've seen people looking in old newspapers. You have a microfiche system of some sort. So they go back and roll the film forward. They're looking for something and appeared in the Lincoln Herald 1898 or something like that. That's a nice service.
Yes, we have newspapers on microfilm that go back to the latter half of the 19th century, all the way up to, well, about the last, I'm trying to think when it's done, maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Now that's neat. You could go fish through that and find things about your grandparents, the people who've lived here their whole life.
Well, yeah, it's very interesting, particularly since a town like Lincoln had several newspapers at the time,
Over the
including a
years.
German language newspaper
Sure.
that was published. And it's just interesting to me, because I actually have a degree in history, to go back and just peruse through some of those old newspapers to see what was going on.
Oh, I should think if I were a history major like you are, I'd have to fight to keep myself away from that.
Well, you see some interesting things, but also you realize that sometimes things haven't changed all that much.
Mr. Starasta, as the director of Lincoln Library, and thank goodness we have Lincoln Library, everything changes day by day. On a given day, when you walk through report to your office for work, what would be your biggest challenge? And they come daily, I'm sure.
Ooh, the biggest challenge, I would just say, I don't know if it's so much on a daily basis, but it's just being able to anticipate where things are going, what people are going to be interested in ahead of time. Although one service we do offer also is computer usage. For instance, we've had people coming in to use our computers with taxes and other such items.
Oh, sure. Sure.
But challenge, I'd say you just constantly have to be on top of what's popular, what people want.
You kind of have to be a mind reader, don't you?
Or at least
Can you expand on your
be aware of what's going on in
Can you expand a little on the use of computers? Let's say Sammy Smith doesn't have a computer at home and wants to learn more about that. I know you're not in the business of teaching computer skills, but let's say somebody walks in and looking for something. How does that work? What is the modus operandi there?
Well, if they're going to use our computers, we would sign them up. They can use a computer for an hour unless if somebody else needs it, we might ask them to get off so that everyone has a fair chance.
I would think so.
If nobody needs it, then we can sign them up for another hour. We can give them some guidance on what they're doing. Now, some people do want to do, say, their taxes or fill out a legal form online. We will show them how to do that, but we cannot give any kind of advice
Well,
Right.
of course
on
not.
what to do,
Yeah.
because we're not qualified to do
But
that.
at least you can help them find where that is located on the menu.
Right, and you can also print to some of our computer printers with your phone.
Oh,
So if you
That's
have something
interesting.
from your phone, you don't necessarily even need to get on one of the physical computers. You can come in and just use your phone and log on and print straight to the printer.
another service that you've offered at the library, and I wonder if that's continued right now, surrounding communities with their newspapers, the Champaign News Gazette, the Decatur Herald, the Peoria Star. Do you still offer those surrounding newspaper services?
We get the
That's got to be
Decatur.
expensive.
Yes, can be, but they're very popular.
Are
We
they?
get the Decatur paper, the Champaign paper, Springfield and Bloomington Pantograph paper, and the Courier as well, and the Wall Street Journal and USA Today. Interesting enough, the Wall Street Journal is very popular.
Is it?
Yeah.
More so than some of the others, do you think?
Well, I wouldn't say it's as popular as, say, the Courier.
Uh-huh.
Or
Can you
maybe-
perceive a trend in the use of the journal? World Times, there's things going on in the country. For instance, right now, this disaster over there in Ukraine. That's a worldwide trend there. Do you see a pickup and use of a paper like, do you take the New York Post by that? I hope you don't, because
No.
I like you very much. But seriously, and I mean this seriously, is there an uptick in trend of use of the Wall Street Journal at various times in our community?
Well, I would say
On our nation.
you see an uptick in the newspapers as a whole whenever there's a big story in the news like that.
People follow, I suppose, the grilling of this potential Supreme Court lady.
Yes, and we also try to keep our current events books up to date. So, for example, if a book comes out about what's going on in Ukraine, we'll definitely get it. Something that can keep people aware of what's going on.
Tell us about how they get books that you don't have in stock, because that service, I think that's an excellent service. I just tell them what book you have, the author, and first thing you know, they'll call you and say, we have it, and they've gotten it from whence? Where did they get those books?
Well, we can get them from other libraries in the state of Illinois. The state of Illinois is basically divided into 3 library systems. We are part of what's called the Illinois Heartland Library System, which is basically roughly the southern half of the state. Then you have what they call RAILS, or the Reaching Across Illinois Library System, which is the northern half of the state, and then the Cook County Library System, which is its own
Well, that's
system.
where the population
And so
is.
it's easy just to interlibrary loan items from any of the libraries in the state through their library system. And
Now,
we can
is
even
there a
get books
time
from out of
limit on
state.
the loan?
Yes, that is set by the loaning library. It's usually 2 weeks and can be renewed one time for an additional 2 weeks. If you need it after that, we can contact the loaning library and ask if they are willing to renew it.
Okay.
Which
People
many
being
times they
people,
would.
sometimes we forget to return a book on time. Used to be a fine for that. Is that still in effect?
No, we, along with many other libraries, are abolishing the idea of fines. The main thing we do is if the book is grossly overdue, I mean, like a year late,
Oh boy.
then we will bill you for the cost of the book.
Well, I would think.
Well, that's not unfair.
Yeah. So,
And I suppose that happens.
rarely, but occasionally.
Yeah, right. Well, you know, it could get set aside somehow, and you'd run across it a year later and say, oh my gosh, this belongs to the library.
Well, I've heard of that happening.
Yeah.
People, I mean, at another library I was at, there were some people who were, I remember they were moving, and they had some books they claimed they just could not find. Well, the very last item they had moved out of their house was their piano, and guess what was behind the
Oh.
piano?
Uh-oh.
So,
You have several, well, not several, many publishers exist. Is there one publishing house that seems to be more popular than others that you buy books from, Mike?
it's difficult to say because there's so many books and so many publishing houses. It's more easier to talk about it in terms of authors. Who are the popular ones, such as James Patterson, Danielle Steele, Nicholas Sparks, as fiction writers.
You talk about James Patterson. Now, I happen to be a Patterson fan as well, and I know you called me and said, we have a book here that you can check out. And, you know, that's a really nice service that you have. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who receives that service at all.
Oh no, anybody can.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's nice, and all they have to do is contact you and say, I'm really interested in books by Dr. Seuss. Would you call me when one comes in?
Yes, we can do that in order to fit whatever your needs are.
That's great. Really, it's a nice service for people.
I always worry about the physical condition of books that are dropped in your return book shelf there. People drive up to it like your mailbox, and I was worried about the damage to the spines and so forth. not to the people, to the books, Judy.
Yeah, right.
just want to make
I'm
sure.
with you.
Okay. Anyway, that's obviously not a big problem, or you wouldn't use that service.
No, it isn't. It's padded inside, and I've never known of an item to be damaged from being dropped in.
Mm-hmm.
I have heard librarians talk about some of the strange things that they have found in a book drop, but
Oh, I bet you
No,
have.
sure, that's fact, yeah.
Yeah, there's always some smart aleck, isn't there?
Now, what are the hours of our Lincoln Library? That's important, I think, because well, a lot of people, a lot of families have both mother and fathers working, and maybe they want to take advantage of the library because they have kids. So what are your hours, sir?
well, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we are open from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're open from 9 to 7 p.m., so we're open a little bit later on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And on Saturdays, we're open from 9 to 1.
Which is
And
a
we're closed
nice
on Sundays.
service for people who are employed. Yeah. Now, how about for people who have young children, who are home with their children? What would be the hours that would interest them?
Well, probably the daytime hours. As I said, we have story times at 10 in the morning and 3:30 in the afternoon.
Yes.
And of
Now,
cour-
what ages do you include in that?
Well, technically, just about anybody from 1 to 110 could come to the
okay.
programs.
He's getting
But
close,
it
Jim.
is probably geared more towards younger kids,
Uh-huh.
elementary school.
Elementary?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
648-5510. Our guest this morning, Mr. Mike Starasta, please. Sorry about that, Mike. He leads the folks there at the library. He leads a really nice staff. These folks are there to serve you, and by golly, serve they do. It's a joy going in there because if you have a question, they're going to do their best to answer your question. And the availability of books that they don't have in stock is an easy thing. We just are lucky to have the Lincoln Library, and we have an excellent board. Folks who live in the community on the Lincoln Library Board giving of their time and their thoughts, and they take that job very seriously, so we salute them while we're discussing our Lincoln Library. It's a gem to have here, not only an architectural, but well, the old fella just went blank. He couldn't even think of the word.
Academic.
Academic, thank you. Promote the...
Call me Radar.
Put a plus on her check next time, Jim. Well, here we go again.
It'll happen.
Showing age. Mike, what is your... do you have a long-range goal in mind for... Did you or your board have a long-range goal in mind that they've expressed?
Well, it's just to continue to meet the needs of the community and be aware of changes. I have had a lot of people ask me, well, where do you think libraries will be, say, in 10 years? And my answer is, I really don't know. Because I don't know what technological changes are going to occur. I mean, I have my smartphone here, and I'll tell you, 10 years ago, I never would have dreamed that something
Right.
like this would exist.
Exactly.
So I don't really know where we're going to go, but we just need to be aware of changes and see how we can best use them to suit the needs of our community.
You know, that's got to be a heck of a challenge because technology is, as you say, is moving right along. And some of us, that be me, are not technocrats at all. I don't do technology. I have one of my kids, by George, isn't interested in it either. But people are just nuts about it. Anything that comes over the computer is biblical.
Well, yes, and so we use that to meet the needs of people. And as I said, I don't view technology as any kind of a threat to libraries. I just view it as something different.
Well, in different ways of getting your services. You
Right,
know, some people can't get up to the library.
Technology allows us, say, to reach out to those who are homebound
Exactly.
in ways that we couldn't have before.
Right.
And during COVID, it was very useful. We had, for instance, children's programs, but we posted them online. So we were still able to meet the needs of the community, but just in a different manner than what we
I bet
previously
people
did.
really appreciated that.
Oh, absolutely.
the kids would miss their story times if they weren't able to get them because of the COVID.
You know, upon reflection, at the time we were able to acquire the Carnegie money to build a library, those old boys, and perhaps old girls too, excuse that expression, old girls, but those folks who were responsible for the planning of and the location of the library indeed left a legacy to us. They certainly did. It's so accessible, and it's a wonderful thing to have for us. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, absolutely. And one thing that I found that I thought was interesting is that Andrew Carnegie didn't just build libraries in the United States. He also used money to start libraries in Canada, in Europe, and one of the most interesting things, I believe it was in Fiji.
Really?
Yes, that he gave money to start libraries.
I didn't ever hear that before.
I hadn't
How
either,
interesting. Well, bless his heart, huh? He made a lot of people happy, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
648-550, and this is your last chance to get a question for Mr. Mike Starasta, our director of our Lincoln Library. And he and our library board just do a whale of a job for our community. Mike, do you have anything you'd like to close with, sir?
Well, I would just like to say again, thank you for having me on this program, and I would strongly encourage everyone to come to the Lincoln Public Library and take a look at what we've got. Because we have these displays, they're constantly changing, there's always something new, and we are more than happy to help you in whatever way we can.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mike Starasta. Thank you and your library board.